All right, time to tell you the bad news about this amp. Okay, so for the Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, I've talked about the great things about it, such as it's loud, it's in your face, it's a very lively amp, killer clean tones. Uh, the gain is, it can be pretty cool sounding, very out front. Great live amp, and that's exactly what it was designed to do. Now let's talk about some of the bad things about the Hot Rod Deluxe. Even though this is probably the #1 selling tube amp in the world in history, it's not without its faults. This is, I believe, well, whatever 2005 was, I think is the Mark IIIs. This is probably a Mark III, might be a Mark IV, I don't know. And I think they're currently at Mark IV or Mark V. And the reason why you got different levels of them is there were problems, with the Deluxe that kind of come up as common problems. You get weird buzzing, you get weird hum, and aside from the normal tube amp stuff that you deal with, guys coming from a transistor amp to a tube amp. This is my first tube amp that I've ever owned. As an amp, not my first dealing with tubes. I had a rack system that had tubes in it, but as far as an actual amplifier, this is the first one that I ever owned. So the first downside to the amp is and I'm not going to talk about the performance stuff because I've already addressed that. If you don't know what you're buying, it's not a fault of the amp if you don't know what you're buying. If you don't know that the whole point of the linear volume is to give you a lot of volume all at once in a very short amount of time for live playing, that's not the fault of the amp. That's you didn't do your research, right? So the fact that this is a loud amp is not a fault of the amp. That's what the amp was designed to do, hence Hot Rod, right? It's the Hot Rod Deluxe. So, but one of the faults with it, and mine was like this right from the get-go. This little light is really common for just burning out, or just not working, or working periodically. It works sometimes, or you got the amp on, you got a red light or a blue light. Some of them are red, some of them are blue, some of them are white, whatever. And then all of a sudden there's no light. That is a common problem with these amps. Not an end of the deal. I don't really care. Another thing that is common with these is the ghost switch. What is the ghost switch? Well, the ghost switch is when you've stepped on it, okay, you've now selected a channel, and for whatever reason, why it does this, halfway through your song, all of a sudden you hear a pop and it's now on another channel. It's only done it at 19 years. It's done it to me twice, and nobody, I don't think, has ever really solved the ghost switch where it just switches channels on you for whatever reason. It's usually going for this amp. It's done it the same twice, but like probably 5 years apart, where I'm on just the rhythm channel and it kicks to the clean channel. It's never happened when I've had the boost on. It's only happened when I had the clean channel, or the rhythm channel on, which is 90% of the time I'm playing, I'm playing with the gain channel most of the time. The other thing is you get these weird hissing and buzzing out of this amp. They're known, some of them are known for weak transformers, and the transformers do go on these things. It is just a common thing with them. So it's, you deal with what you deal. The other one is the burping blurby speaker thingy. Typically happens when the amp is new. Hence why they probably swapped out the speaker that was in there. So I have the Eminence speaker in there. I guess the Mark I's must have had the Jensen Black Widow speaker. And I always thought it was a Black Widow in there. I just kind of looked at it and it was like, because I read the specs online, right? And the specs might, they might give you the specs for the amp, but which Mark is Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, you know. So you're going to get this amp with a whole bunch of different speakers. Right now I think they're using the A type, Celestion A type in there. I think it's Eminence A type or Celestion A type, whatever's in there. And I got that, whatever that Eminence speaker is. It doesn't matter. It seems like the early models of this, you got the amp and you're breaking it in, and all of a sudden you get this unbelievably god awful, horrible overtone. You'll hit a certain note on the guitar. It's usually on one of the lower strings, and the note will just blurb. Like it's just like it's just like taking the mid and just going, crazy on it, right? And it just blurbs this note out on you. And you can even hear the speaker go like that, like a farting or a burping sound, right? And it will do that until the speaker kind of breaks in once in a while. It doesn't do it all the time. It did it to me, I think, maybe once. And now you have to understand, I've played the crap out of this amp. It's never been on stage. I know. Shame on me. But I've played it lots, hours and hours and hours. A lot of enjoyment out of this amp. I have no regrets of buying this amp whatsoever. So the other thing is that staying with the speaker is the Hot Rod Deluxe is a weird amp where it's hard to find a good speaker for it, because it is kind of it's a very versatile amp in one ways, but it's kind of a one-trick pony in others. And because of that, the compromise you have to make of a single channel amp with 3 different stages is that you have to find something that can kind of accommodate really good cleans, with a lot of dynamics, but then have a good gain stage without just sounding like mush, right? And that's the problem you get with some speakers. Is speakers, depending on how they're set up, is a lot of the time the speaker, it will basically be tailored more. Like, for example, the Celestion 90 C90 black shadows that are in the Mesa Boogie. That thing is, those speakers are incredible. They're a lot more sterile sounding because they kind of handle effects well. They handle large hard gain distortions perfectly. But they sound a little sterile clean because they're not as a dynamic of they're a more stable speaker rather than a really sculpted mid or anything like that dynamic speaker sound, where this is kind of trying to do jack of all trades, where these ones, it's like you want a tight sounding speaker, there you go. You want a clear sounding speaker, there you go. You want something that can take a lot of volume and a lot of gain, there you go, and still stay clear, there you go. This you get, like, it's not necessarily a crappy speaker because it does sound good in certain settings. If you get the setting right, it sounds quite glorious. It really sparkles. It really pops out. It has lots of low end, lots of mid cut through it. The highs can, be almost glass shattering, whatever. But it can also be a harsh sounding speaker. It could be very muddy. It could be it's very loose. It's kind of flubby sounding, where you don't really get the note articulation that you want. So if you're playing like really twangy, loose country style, yeah, it's fine for that. But you want to play a tighter rock, metal, or even a really tight blues sound, it can kind of be a little bit lacking there. So the speaker is probably the first thing I would upgrade in this. Whenever that day comes, that's probably what I'm going to do, is focus on the speakers. Other problems with the Hot Rod Deluxe, well, it's not really a problem, but it's something you have to live with, is the fact that it's heavy. For the size of it, it's very heavy. It's like 55 pounds or whatever, 45, 50 pounds, 55, 60 pounds, whatever it weighs. So it's a bit cumbersome to lug around, which when you have an amp that's cumbersome to lug around, it takes a lot of fun out of it. Especially if you go up like lots of flights of stairs or whatever, and there's no wheels on it. So it would be nice to have like little casters or something on it. But then something like this with the casters, you hit, if it flipped, you got the fragility of a tube amp, right? You really don't want this thing falling over on you. Although, when Marty McFly kicks his amp over on the stage. You have to understand that's a show. It's a movie, right? You Marty McFly this amp and kick it on its side. You'll probably wreck the tubes in it and all kinds of circuitry. Crackling pots. That's I'm starting to get the really crackly pots now. It is something that happens to them. All amps suffer from this, but the hot rod particularly seems to be really notorious for like really crackly. You know, you're playing and there's like, say the drummer's like using the pedal or whatever and it's shaking the floor, you start hearing this crackling sound and from your pots and the jack and all that. For whatever reason, over time they tend to get really crackly. How do you fix it? Is it always, you know, new pots? Whatever, I don't know. But that's pretty much, there's a few more negatives that I'm sure other people will put it in the comments, but I'll do one more video about it and tell you about the great things about the amp.